Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Basketball PH podcast. Enjoy the show.
What is up, mga paps? Happy weekend to everyone. Uh, Again, this is your fantasy papi, Papi Roy of Fantasy Basketball PH, your Filipino brand of fantasy basketball. So we are now down with our awards day for the whole season of 2020-21 fantasy basketball. So it was quite a while since what? I guess November, months like that. We've been talking about several players, hyping some players. Some went well, some were gone the drain. So let's see what happened. If you can remember, the last time we did an episode like this, I was with our introduction voice, which is our good brother Josh Lloyd of Basketball Monster and Locked On Fantasy. So the backstory there was, I hope Josh Lloyd will check this episode out. So Josh, the real thing that happened there was you did respond to my our conversation and you said, "Hey, I'm free now," so I don't have a topic during that day. I just woke up, so what I did is just pick up an interesting topic and then just we did our thing. So given that we did a sort of like a mid-season projection with Josh, today we'll be doing the same, and again with a special guest. This is something that I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. Someone with full of energy, Mr. Taco of our the Daily Sporting. So I want to shout out to the Daily Sporting. If you haven't checked them out, they're a legit page and podcast for informations not only for fantasy basketball but also fantasy football and actually basketball and sports in general. So without further ado, let me add in our good old Mr. Taco. What's up,
What's up,
bro?
Papi? What's up, man? I'm feeling great. Thank you for the great introduction. I try to do my best to get some people on to talk, and I like to talk, fantasy basketball, fantasy baseball, fantasy football, love the regular sports. So I'm excited to be here and do this award show with you. I know you had Josh Lloyd on the first time, but hopefully I represent good enough that you can't tell the difference.
You'll definitely represent good enough as long as you don't love Hassan Whiteside.
Oh
shout,
man. Oh,
shout out to
man.
Josh. We
That
all
guy.
know how he love some Whiteside in the sides. Okay, so just a recap, bro. So
Mhm,
last time we did like a mid-season
mhm,
analysis. So personally, this was my list for
mhm,
at least the mid-season MVP. I chose Jokic
mhm.
for the defensive player, defensive minister, as I call them, is Miles Turner, Rookie of the Year. Back then was Lamelo Ball, waiver wire pickup, which is I think this is the player that was sort of like talked about during that time, and a lot of our fantasy basketball PH family also reverted about this pick because some of them think that it should be like the likes of Tyrus Halliburton or Keldon Johnson. But during that time, I really thought that TJ McConnell has that staying power over those players, given that they are still young. And I was expecting an up and down game. And then we also have the breakout player of the season, your boy Julius Randle from the New York Knicks, and then bounce back player Mike Conley, sleeper player Jeremy Grant, and the bust of the season back then is Hassan Whiteside. So let's see if these players is still part of our list. And of course, I really would love to hear your thoughts per award and per player. So dun 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 dun, drum roll. Let's see who are our final list. So let's talk about first for our MVP. I'm thinking which players would you still add in the line, at least for fantasy? So for the fantasy basketball PH family, I think we are in unison to vote the Joker, Nikola Jokic. Your thoughts, bro?
I don't think there's anyone that could take that spot. He's not only the real life MVP, but he's a fantasy MVP. And here's why. Number one, he wasn't drafted with the number one pick. You're probably getting him around pick 4 or pick 5. Some drafts you might get him as late as 7. So to get a guy that's been consistently the number one player throughout the season around the 7th pick, you can't be more valuable than being the number one guy. And to get him at lower than the number one spot, it's a valuable pick. He's a valuable player. He is the best this year.
Exactly. Actually, in my previous episode, I was like selling the idea that, you know what, Jokic can be the season sleeper player just because of the value he brings. I understand there could be other players that, you know, was like drafted in hundreds but provided top 30 value. But, you know, getting that number one player, giving you all day long almost triple double with 20 10 10 value all throughout the year. I was selling at the idea of that maybe we can also talk about Jokic as a sleeper. But generally, just to, you know, have a clear cut segregation of awards, I guess there's, like what you said, there's no one else here that would definitely be fighting against Nikola Jokic, at least in fantasy. But to make things a little bit, you know, saucy, do you think who is the runner-ups after Nikola Jokic?
And one thing that I'll point out with Jokic before we move on, Jokic was top 3 in assists for a center. He was top 5 in rebounds for a center, and he's top 3 in points, and he plays center. Like, as we all know, most league centers, probably you're going to have 2 spots in it. So it's a position where there's not that many like studs, but there is a lot of positions that you got to fill with like guys that you're not even like Time Lord. Everyone loved because he may not have got the minutes, but as a center, everyone's like, oh my God, this guy is something special. And I think that's the same thing that we have with Jokic. And then if you're talking about like a substitute MVP, I mean, I think that when I look at MVP, you could take it from either way that you're looking at it. Like you said, it could be like a mid-round guy that delivers so much above his value that he's such a great player, or it could be just you know, one of those guys that you draft the top that's really really good. But I think my MVP player might be Chris Paul, because Chris Paul was a top 10 player at the end of the season, but in most drafts I was getting him around the 5th round, the 50th pick. Maybe a little bit later, maybe a little bit earlier, depending on the league that I'm in. But to get Chris Paul around there, that's insane value. And at the end of the season, he was like a top, I want to say like, he was top 5 in category-based leagues and season totals. So I think that's a fantastic upside guy, if you're looking at that way. Guy that you're drafting, you know, between 33 and 50, that ended up being, you know, top 5.
Yeah, I would also agree with that. Just because of the value, you like what you said, that you will get out of that mid 3rd round or late 2nd round, but eventually gave you a lot of stats, especially in the point guard category all season long. I guess that's one of the most important thing in this season for Chris Paul, because everyone, even I, thought that, hey, maybe this is the time he would, you know, like how we see LeBron, maybe rest for a couple of games, maybe just play around 25 minutes. But no, Chris Paul really is emphasizing his tag as the point guard, at least for this generation. So I really agree with that. And if I would like to add another guard that could be in this conversation, I would also put in here Stephen Curry, at least as runner-ups, just because also the value, he was picked almost in the area of Nikola Jokic, maybe depending on the your leagues. At least in our country, there will be instances he'll get picked, you know, earlier, just because there's a lot of GSW fans in the Philippines. But generally, I think he's also a mid rounder. There's a lot of GMs that are, you know, still getting away from Curry just because of the previous injuries, right? So I guess there's still value. And another thing that makes me put Curry in this conversation is what he did during the fantasy playoffs. I
Mhm.
mean, out of those first rounders, I guess Stephen Curry is one of those players that really um, played from the start, even if he did rest for a couple of days or maybe weeks. But during playoffs, as your first rounder, he really did, gave you a lot of 30 pointers, some 40 pointers, and then more than 8 snipes per game in a couple of days. So if JSW played like 4 days of that week, I'm pretty sure you've been super happy with Stephen Curry as your first round.
Yep. And one last player that I'll touch on this because he's my boy, Julius Randle. Because Julius
Yeah,
Randle went as like we want to say like in the 80s, but he performed his top 15. He's one of those guys as well where if you got him, he was great all year long.
agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let's move into a category that I was really hoping he won't be this he won't be the winner because he's been really been the some kind of like the household name when you
Mm-hmm.
say about defensive stats. So in reality and in fantasy, I think Rudy Gobert is has been also a tear of the season in terms of being that defensive plug for the Utah Jazz. One thing that I would highlight for Rudy Gobert is probably the fact that he was healthier than other defensive guys. Actually, in general, Utah was healthier. Aside from the Conley injury and the Donovan Mitchell injury, they've been healthy compared to other teams. It's something that I mean, I'm not saying that they're just winning because they are healthy, right? But still, in this specific season, a COVID season, I think it's quite important for a certain player to be healthy, play more than 70 games, and contribute in your team all season long. So I was thinking, I was checking out Jimmy Butler, I was checking out Clint Capella at some point. Also, Jonas Valanciunas because he has been rebounding like crazy for quite some time. But when I sum it up, added steals, added blocks, rebounds, and also check the number of games. I mean, I have to give it to Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, I mean, I in real life, more than likely, he's gonna win this award, and it's mainly because of one, he has a great reputation. Two, he's an elite shot blocker and he's an elite rebounder. I think that your original preseason lock would have won had he stayed healthy in Miles Turner, because
Yeah,
when you look at Miles Turner in comparison to Gobert, he played less games, but he was only you're looking at 31 blocks behind him. They had the same amount of steals. Now, yes, Gobert tripled him up in rebounds. So that's one thing that we can say that Rudy did. But if Turner keeps playing, it's not tripled up in rebounds. He beats him in steals and blocks. He probably ends up coming and beating him. But I'll go off the beaten path because I mean I think it's really hard to go against Gobert, and he's going to win the award in real life. So we have to keep that with a grain of salt. He led the league in blocks. He led the league in rebounds, or he was top 5 in rebounds, I should say. Wait, no, he did lead the league in rebounds. Excuse me, I'm sorry. But the guy that I would put there is he doesn't rebound the most, but I feel like he's like the best kind of steals and blocks guy that we've seen this season. Got good value for them, and that's Robert Covington from the Portland Trailblazers. This guy had 83 blocks and 101 steals. He's like one of the few guys that are like really high in both categories, where he's averaging over a steal and over a block per game. And that's elite defensively when you're thinking about it. He may not have the most rebounds, but like defensive stat wise, he's like right there.
yeah, and I think if you're playing in Roto format, it will also highlight more on how Covington contributed because there were weeks that he wasn't playing well. But the thing is, he was still defending.
Mhm.
The snipes aren't there, the points aren't there, the rebounds maybe aren't there, but those steals are still there. That's the reason why he garnered a lot of steals across the season.
Yep. And one thing
Yeah,
about
go ahead.
Covington It does gonna say is he ended the season in Yahoo nine category head-to-head leagues as a number 19 player. And it was mainly behind two things. Like you said, he's not the best scorer. He's not the best rebounder. So that does leave you something to be desired. But with the turnovers, he only had 64 for the whole season. So you're looking at less than a turnover per game. He's what I call Mr. Efficient. And for me, I build my team. I want to get 4 to 5 guys like this in the draft so that my turnovers are low during the season. I'll have the good defensive stats, which are hard to stream and hard to get on the waiver wire. And then points and rebounds, I could try to find someone who's hot at a given time. And the thing about Covington that was great, he had 135 threes and he plays the center. So to get a center that has under 1 turnover per game, over 1 3 per game, and getting you about a block and a steal per game, I think that's pretty elite.
Exactly. I'm really hyped on how would the GMs value Covington next season, because I'm pretty sure people are now torn, especially those people that majority of the GMs. I'm not saying this will be true to everyone, but majority of the GMs really has a keen eye on the points. So when you see players that doesn't score, it somehow devaluates in their perspective.
And I'll be honest with you. No, keep going, because you're making a great point now. I'll follow up on that.
Yeah, I was just about to say another player that almost similar on what we've been pitching to each other. I'm gonna have to also put in here the donkey Draymond Green, because he's another player that doesn't score. Actually, he's doing triple doubles without scoring double figures, right, for quite some time. So, though the difference between him and Covington is he has more turnovers. So there's a fine line between the two of them. But in terms of how he impacted the game, he also started slow in the season. But during the midseason and even in the playoffs, he was contributing a lot of defensive stats and also those super important dimes. I guess those combinations is really hard to find. So I have to also tag in Draymond Green in this conversation as well.
And just to add on to that, Draymond Green, I feel like a lot of people slept on his assists this year because he had more assists than he had points or rebounds. And in the league this year, he was like the 5th highest assist total guy. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah. I mean, Draymond was drafted around
60, I would say. Around
late mid, right?
Yeah, like around between picks 50 and 70. He'd be somewhere in that range. Higher or lower, depending on how you value.
And for a player drafted that kind of low and give you that amount of dimes, he's super important. Having a Draymond Green in your team, and when there's a week wherein GSW plays like more than 4 games or at least 4 games, you'll definitely win assist for sure. I'm gotta bet myself on that. That's how valuable this type of players are. The ones that has really can provide category stats in chunks, and like what Mr. Taco mentioned earlier, one of them is also Miles Turner. There are weeks wherein Turner is like blocking like crazy. So in just one player, you win a category. That's how valuable he was. But unfortunately, again, I'm also excited on how people will value Miles Turner, because he just like played around 50 games within the season. So it's a big consideration for a lot of GMs.
I think the number one thing that what a GM has to look at in these situations, and I know that it gets so like when you look at Draymond Green or when you look at a Miles Turner, you can see those gaudy, points or rebounds or blocks. But like you said, a lot of players have the affinity towards points, and if they don't see a guy really getting points or scoring a lot, they tend to shy away from them and go with the other players. And this is where I'm going to say again, you need to have a strategy in mind when you're building your team, because you just can't go picking one of this, one of that, one of this, one of that, and then expect to have a good team at the end of the season. You need to go into your draft saying, I want to focus on building my blocks and my steals with low turnovers and good percentages, because then you can draft guys that fit that mold. Because imagine you get a Draymond Green, right? And Draymond Green's your only assist guy. And you may have, a lot of faith in Draymond, but maybe it could be over faith, because when you go against the team that is Jokic or Chris Paul, and then they have, that backup point guard that's really been, dynamite, like they got themselves like the Ja Morant or the Mcconnell, who, maybe they're not top 5, but they're like right underneath their 5 to 10. They're in that range, and that built them up to be just enough to be past you. So when you're drafting, you kind of have to keep these things in mind. Like, okay, if I'm going to take Draymond Green, I definitely should in the later rounds try to secure a point guard that's going to be legit with the assists, so I can build this category up to be something that week in, week out, I can almost bank on getting the point from this category. And I feel like that's one thing that people don't do. They like to sometimes be too balanced. They like to, I like to have a little bit of everything. No, win your categories, blow up on some categories, and then if you have to trade some excess off, do so and fill the holes that you need to fill.
Yeah, 100% agree on that. In the previous episodes, we've kind of like talked about that information, like also given that there we have what we call the identity of your team. You have to know that identity. You have to build on that identity. You have to support your core that provides that identity. So these tips and these thoughts are really gold if you wanted to really excel here in fantasy basketball. Imagine this: you pick like Miles Turner, just expecting him to be like your block guy, and the moment that he doesn't block, thing about Miles Turner, the reason why he is not that guy that you will see in the top 20 is he doesn't do much else other than block. He doesn't give you a lot of rebounds for a center, which is a bad thing for a big. He doesn't score when he doesn't score or shoot those snipes. So that's the thing about Miles Turner. When he doesn't score outside, he is having a hard time providing points, especially if Sabonis is healthy. That's like it's Sabonis is sort of like Russell Westbrook of the Indiana Pacers in terms of the front court, because whenever he plays, a lot of things happens. You should observe this, right? Remember when Sabonis was out, Turner was playing solid. He was like a first round value. When Sabonis got healthy, Turner's value is now leaning towards blocks and nothing else. So yeah.
I'll be honest with you, Miles Turner, especially in the early episodes of my show before he got hurt, he was riding in the top 10, top 15 in categories-based leagues all season. And I was ringing the bell. Sell high, sell high, sell high. He's only blocks. Look at the counting stats. He doesn't get enough of them to justify it. Yes, he gets some threes. Yes, unless you built your whole team on needing blocks, and he's the only guy that does your blocks, then I would say, hold on to him. But if not, deal him high, get some valuable pieces, get some guys that are buy lows, and build your team up. And then he got hurt. And I felt bad for him because, he's a good player. You don't want to see players get hurt. But at some point in time, it just made me feel like, damn, I was right. Because it's just a bad situation. And he was no way he was going to end the way he started, because he ended like a monster. Started like a monster. And he was like blocking like almost 5-6 shots a game.
Exactly.
It was like Time Lord last night for every game.
It's like it can't be sustainable for like the whole season. I mean, 6 blocks per game, and there was an instance where he got injured because of blocking, right? And it was like ironic during the time, because he was really very passionate about being recognized as a defensive source of the Indiana Pacers, or a player in general in the NBA, and I really is rooting for him. Because he really deserves some recognition, right? But unfortunately, injuries were there. Sabonis came back, so yeah, that's why it's important for you to like listen from the likes of Mr. Taco here, because based on his experience and his analysis and his observation, there's a perfect timing or like a sweet spot wherein, hey, we can get a value here. This is not sustainable. You really have to deal him. You really have to strike it while it's hot to get some value. So
the perfect analogy to that is, I don't know if anyone like is familiar with stocks, but GameStop, GameStop in America, it was a stock that was like really bad. No one bought it. Then all of a sudden, they had this Reddit community. All of a sudden, everyone's buying it. Buy. And then people were buying into it when it already gotten too high. And I'm like, bro, like if you were going to buy, you had to buy at a certain point because now you're leaving yourself for fall, your error, it's going to get to the point where that thing is going to drop. And if you're buying it too high, you're not going to get your value back. And it's the same thing with Miles Turner. His value had exceeded what his real worth was. And at that point in time, that's the time you make the trade. When a guy's worth is less than his value, that's when you trade for him. When you look at guys that are struggling early, but they're better players than that. And at the end of the day, it's a long season. So they may start bad with the first 20, but the last 62 could be great. So that's what you have to look at when you're looking at maybe making a trade or looking at doing something like that, because there's multiple ways to trade. There's a trade for need and there's a trade for potential.
Exactly. And I've been like preaching for several times when I talk about trades. Never ever trade just for the sake of trading, because it's gonna be downward spiral when you do that. And speaking of a perfect spot, I guess this next award is somehow related to that situation, because for our rookie stud of the season, I was really pushing, and I am really a fan of LaMelo Ball. I think LaMelo is, in terms of fantasy, is gonna be great moving forward. If you own him in Dynasty, I'm really jealous of you, because his skill set will definitely be a stud in terms of fantasy. But unfortunately, he was injured for quite some time, and again, I'm really looking to give an award to someone that really impacted the whole season. I was also thinking about Tyrus Halliburton. Tyrus Halliburton is a rookie that won't wow you in terms of stats, because he doesn't need the ball so much. He's super efficient to the point that he provides value without hurting you. So there's a different category of that. There's some GMs might not be fond of that value, because everyone thought that hey, Halliburton just needs some minutes, but when he got some minutes, he still didn't put up like eye-popping stats, because that's not his game. His game, he's a smart player. He's the most ready rookie of this slate. So it really showed during the season. So those two are the runner-ups from my end. But I have to give it to Ant. During the first half of the season, I'm pretty sure a lot of GMs even dropped him, because if he's trying to shoot 20 times, he's just sinking 7, something like that during the first half of the season. But the injuries for the Minnesota Timberwolves really helped his value, and the fact that he helped a lot of teams during the playoffs, I guess that's the icing on the cake for me to really nominate Anthony Edwards as a rookie stud of this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Edwards in real life, I think he started to show some real potential at the end of the season, where he started coming to his own, scoring and taking it to the rack. But like you said, for the season, he shot 41%. So that's kind of like, that's actually hurting you.
Imagine having him and Russell Westbrook in the first half of the season.
Man, listen, if I have both those guys, I'm tanking field goal. I'll take give me all the bad field goals, but y'all got to do other stuff. You know what I mean?
You get some Graham, right?
Right, and that's the one thing about Edwards that leaves you wanting more. Yes, he averaged 2.4 threes per game, which is solid. Okay. He gave you 19.3 points per game, which is solid. Rebounds wise, 4.7, assists, 2.9, steals, 1.1. He's been solid, but your runner up, I mean, if he didn't get hurt, he would have been the winner. And that's Tyrese Halliburton. And the reason why he shot 47% from the field, yes, he doesn't shoot the most, like Poppy says, but he was efficient, 47% from the field on 13 points. Yes, it's 6 points less than the other guy, but it's so much better field goal percentage, and I'm getting 2 categories, even if I'm not getting the points. Free throws, he was great, 85%. Threes, he hit 2.1 threes per game, so he's right there with Edwards. But the thing that you gotta look at, he averaged 5.3 assists. He had 3 rebounds. He had 1.3 steals. He only had 1.6 turnovers, and he had 0.5 blocks. He fills the categories everywhere. Doesn't hurt you anywhere. He is what I call a taco delight. You know, that's a supreme taco right there. He gives you everything that you want, all in one package. You got the guacamole, the sour cream, the salsa, and the cheese all together, baby. And that's why I have Halliburton at that point. And if he would have stayed healthy, he would have been a monster. But he did open up the opportunity for my playoffs magic pick, which, you know, you have to stay tuned for.
Yeah. I mean, I really love those two rookies. Halliburton and LaMelo Ball. I have a personal question to you, bro.
Sure.
With everyone knows how you love the New York Knicks.
Absolutely.
Did you really think New York Knicks messed up not getting Halliburton?
No. Because I mean, let's put it like this. Halliburton is great. Halliburton looks great. Halliburton has upside. But when we were coming into the draft and we look at the way the guy shot, a lot of people didn't think that was going to translate. And yes, it did translate, but more than likely, we had no clue. And with that being said, we still got Emmanuel quickly with our 23rd pick, 25th pick overall. So we ended up getting a top flight point guard or a potential point guard there. The other reason why I don't really look at it that bad is because when I see what Obi Toppin does, Obi Toppin did not play great by any statistical categories in the NBA. But if you watched him play, he kept on getting better. He kept on working at it. He would sometimes get defeated because a lot of times Thibodeau was just putting him in the corner 3 to space out so that Randle can get to the basket or RJ can get to the basket or whoever's on the floor gets to the basket. But I think that if we get a real point guard, which I'm pretty sure we're going to get in this offseason, that's going to unlock Obi Toppin. And Obi Toppin is going to look ferocious, especially in the front, in the like running transition, taking it to the basket, rim running, all of that. He's going to be great. He's worked on developing that 3-pointer so he could space out the floor. Yes, the Knicks desperately need a point guard. Yes, the Knicks really need someone that could distribute and create for everyone. But no, I don't miss out on Tyrese Halliburton because we did get Emmanuel quickly at 23. And we can see the upside that Obi Toppin offers to us at that 8th pick. I think Halliburton's going to be great, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to be in the market for a top flight point guard. And I'm pretty sure Derrick Rose is coming back, which should put us in a situation of, do we really need Halliburton? And I am still a Frank Ntilikina fan. So how can we have Tyrese Halliburton on the team when we have Frank Ntilikina? They're basically the same player. Like, you know what I mean? The only difference is Frank Ntilikina has not developed himself into a real playmaker. But I'm hoping that we're going to see him tonight for the Knicks in the real-life playoffs. And I think he's going to play great defense on Trae Young. And that's going to be one of the biggest reasons why we didn't go after Hallie.
And actually, my personal take on that is I thought that there would be other options. I mean, better options that, the New York Knicks could have played around. But generally, it was a win-win pick. Just because New York is New York. I mean, you have to get Obi Toppin. I mean, if there's a team that will draft Obi Toppin, I really thought that it was New York. Also, Thibodeau is a coach that won't really play rookies that much. So if you have the most ready rookie for NBA and you go to that coach, I guess Tyrese Halliburton would have been as happy as today. So generally, I thought it was a win-win situation, and getting Emmanuel quickly was really a solid pick for the New York Knicks.
Yeah.
I think he really has the potential to be the future probably off guard of the New York Knicks, especially under the wing of Derrick Rose.
Yes, I definitely agree with everything you said there, and I think that's the biggest reason why, as Knicks fans, we don't get mad at Halliburton going to some Knicks fans do, but I don't think they really understand. Like Obi Toppin, yes, we didn't expect Julius Randle to do this. Like, full honesty, us Knicks fans were 50-50 on him, and he showed flashes, but he never delivered. And I think the way the organization was thinking, like, hey, if we trade Julius, we can have Obi fill in that role and take over, and boom, we'll be good. And I think that was originally part of the reason why they're thinking Obi Toppin there. So what Julius did is he completely shut all that talk down. And now Obi could either be a trade chip for a possible stud that we're looking for in the future, or a player that we developed could be a really nice player on this team. Because, like you said, Tibbs really doesn't play rookies like that. But Obi did carve out a little role. He did play like a solid 10 to 12 minutes a game. He got into the rotation. He was playing over some other guys. And he started to work on getting that jumper down. Because in college, like, he could shoot, but he didn't shoot as much as he did because it was so easy for him to get to the basket and to post up. That now in the NBA, they're asking him to do something that he didn't do as much in college. And I feel like that's something that, especially, they didn't have a real training camp because remember, this is one of the weirdest rookie classes ever because they got drafted almost like a month before the season started. So this guy didn't have a real off season. He didn't have the whole program to go through. They didn't have time to train him for what they want him to do. So I think you have to take it all with a grain of salt this year with a guy like Obi.
Exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
And now, uh, the next award that we're gonna talk about is really hard to judge for me. This is super subjective. I had several players that I've considered here in this award, which is the waiver wire pickup award. So initially, during the midseason, I was really pushing TJ McConnell just because of in general, his ability to get a lot of steals and dimes is a low key valuable stat in fantasy basketball, especially those dimes. Because when you drafted guards in free agency, you really can't get you'll be super lucky if you get a player that gives you like 7 assists per game. So that's how I value dime. So that's the reason why I was really pushing TJ McConnell. But I would also understand the case of Tyrus Halliburton. But
Mm.
now, when I gauge the whole category or the whole players that I'm choosing uh, in general for all season long, I ended up picking KO Kelly Olynyk. Uh, he was he wasn't drafted for sure in like most of the leagues. That's why he was part of the waiver pickup. So just to be clear, this award goes to all the prerequisite here is that a player should have not been drafted. If you're in the 30 team draft, probably he was drafted. But in general, in like standard leagues, I doubt that he was drafted initially. So with that said, the whole season long he was a surprise. There were games that he was like mediocre, but he's still contributing. Maybe one of the reason he was really providing such value is because of the absence of Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler for quite some time. But the reason I really leaned on him to get this award was aside of providing like runs or streaks, like 2 to 3 weeks, getting a lot of good stats, is the playoffs. When he was traded to the Houston Rockets, and the moment that Christian Wood really seated, I mean, if you're playing DFS, there are instances wherein Kelly Olynyk was the highest valued center or PF in several days. So that's one of like the proof how good Kelly Olynyk was post Miami Houston trade. So with that said, again, when I weigh the value of that player that helped you, that you picked up just in out of the free agency, help you several weeks, maybe not all weeks, but definitely several weeks, which help you to be part of the playoffs, and then during playoffs, actually is an arguable MVP playoff player. I have to give it to Kelly Olynyk. But if I need to really put in several names here, I was also thinking that DeAndre Hunter is really tore it apart in the first half. If we'll just focus on that time frame, because there again, I don't think DeAndre Hunter was drafted majority of the times. He probably in 16 deep or 14 deep, but in standard leagues, I really doubt that he was drafted as well. And he was really uh, actually the front runner for me for the most improved player. But unfortunately, he was hurt, so we have to move away from him. I'm always also thinking about Keldon Johnson, who started strong for the San Antonio Spurs. You have Tyrus Halliburton as well from the Sacramento Kings, and then slow mo Kyle Anderson, who was really really a revelation for this season. So I really want to hear your thoughts, Mr. Taco.
You got my guy at the very end. Slow mo was money. This dude was money. Now, Kyle Anderson, if we think about him in terms of just being like a scorer, you're not going to get that because we already know everyone has the infatuation with scoring. He is not what we call a scorer. What he is he's a baller. Like this dude, he was able to do something that we don't really see. Huh? I'm just pulling up his stats right now. Now, on the season, he averaged 1.3 3-pointers, well, 1.4 3-pointers made, which is a huge bump from what he normally did. And I think that's what started to provide him with the value that we didn't expect. Because when you look at a guy like Kyle Anderson, he's always been low turnovers, good efficiency. He'll get you some steals, he'll get you some blocks. But I think this year, what he did better than most other years, he increased his three output, which gave him another category. His points went slightly up because he was averaging about 12.4 per game. It was more than 10, which, is kind of better than what normally he would do. And then the thing about him is he had 5.7 rebounds and 3.6 assists per game. So he was contributing to you in rebounds and assists. So he became literally I want to say a 9-category guy because he's almost at a block per game, almost at a steal per game, over a 3 per game, 46% from the field, 78 from the free throw, 1 turnover a game, 12 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. Like every single category, he's not the best, but he's at least in the top, third of most categories, or slightly below it in points, but in the other categories, he's right there. And I think that's insane value. And that shooting 46%. That's really good, especially like if you do categories-based leagues. Number one kind of player I'm looking for is like this. A guy, he may not be the most points, but those steals are there, those blocks are there, those threes are there. He doesn't kill you in turnovers, doesn't kill you in free throws or field goal. Think about it. Field goal, free throw, assist, block, turnovers. That's 5. You win right there. 5 categories.
Yeah, and an upside to give you snipes
Yep.
and sometimes points.
Assist. Yeah.
My story here for Slow Mo, I was also a fan of him just because he was a Spur, and I'm super biased with my Spurs players, And then I was telling everyone, I was hyping him up, but I was telling everyone to watch out for Justice Winslow. Not because he was a good player, just because Memphis was really interested with Justice Winslow. So me too, reading those stuff from their reporters and writers, that caught my attention. And I assume that if and only if Justice Winslow plays well, this will definitely kill Kyle Anderson's value, because Kyle Anderson, his role here in the Memphis Grizzlies is very important because he is the second ball handler in their starting five. Ja Morant, he's not yet there as a point guard. I guess that's why Slow-Mo is valuable in their lineup. He really does that very well. He's like the Boris Diaw of the new generation. That's how I see Kyle Anderson.
You can tell you Spurs bias right there.
Yeah, exactly. And when I thought of that, that's also how Justice Winslow plays. He's like a defensive, like they hyped him up back in the Miami days as like the Kawhi Leonard of their generation with playmaking skills, but it didn't pay well, and that also happened there in Memphis. And the moment that he really shot very bad and just running around for a couple of games, not contributing anything. So I guess their coach really recognized that and really gave in Slow-Mo the break. And also another thing that was like a domino effect with this Kyle Anderson revelation for the season was Brandon Clark. So there's a lot of GMs that was expecting that, hey, Triple J is out, maybe Brandon Clark will go off, but it didn't went well for Brandon Clark because Dylan Brooks was playing super well, Kyle Anderson was playing super well, and then those young guns of them, you have Desmond Bain, you have their previous kind of new acquisition out of Grayson Allen playing well, and even John Conchar, who was like a low key solid pick out of the rookie slate, was also playing well when has an opportunity. So I guess there's a lot of things to be excited if you're a Memphis fan, and
Mhm.
one of them is definitely Slomo, who was
Mhm.
the runner-up of this award.
And one last player, since we're just talking about Memphis, that I've actually been excited about since I've been watching, especially with the playing games, because I was one of the few people, I posted on the page. I had Memphis beating the Golden State Warriors in that
I
game.
saw that. I saw that.
I was very adamant about it. I made sure I came out early with it, so this way no one could be like, you didn't have no. And I said for the exact reasons of the way that team plays. They're great rebounders, and they have a guy that I really like, and that's the shooting guard. I want not Desmond Bain, the Dylan Brooks.
Dylan
Dylan
Brooks.
Brooks is a real defender, like real life. We're talking here for a second. Here's a real life defender. And I'm going to love seeing this Memphis Grizzlies team faces the Utah Jazz because I think Dylan Brooks is going to be inside Donovan Mitchell's coat pocket all night long. And it's going to frustrate Mitchell. And that is one matchup that I cannot wait to watch because of the way Dylan Brooks was really playing, especially in that Spurs game, because that game started getting close near the end. And he made a couple of stops and a couple of times he really shut down DeRozan. And DeRozan, we know, is the big scorer playmaker for the Spurs, other than Murray. And Murray, I feel like till the end of the season started losing his shine a little bit. But yeah, man, he's someone in real life that I'm really interested to watch, especially in this playoff series, because I feel like he could be a difference maker. And while I don't think Memphis is going to beat Utah, I think depending on how well he plays, could dictate how close that series really is. Because if he's able to keep Donovan Mitchell shooting really, really bad, that's going to open up the game for the rebounders to rebound, for them to get out of transition and let Ja Morant do his thing. So I want to say one last thing on the sleepers, or the waiver wire pickup before we go, and that's a Spur that you actually forgot to mention, who's been one of my favorite waiver wire. Well, I have two waiver wire guys that I have to bring up. One, the Spur, Potel. He was a good pickup. Jakob He was like for at the end of the season, he got frustrating once they had Eubanks starting to get time and they started trying to tank, and then they got Jordan Dang. I forgot. Yeah. Once they got him, the minutes started to get. But for a good portion of that season, especially when you were trying to get into that playoff run, he was a key contributor. He was getting the good blocks. He had solid points and rebounds with great percentages. His free throw stunk, but his field goal was great. And then the other guy is the guy that Cleveland traded to Houston. And that's Kevin Porter Jr. Kevin Porter Jr., when he came and he started playing before he got sick and everything like that to end of the season. So we know he didn't finish the season for the Rockets. But Kevin Porter Jr. off the waiver wire was a monster. He was a monster. He was getting the snipes. He was getting the points. He was getting the assists. He's someone coming into next season that I'm extremely high for.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially with Jakob Poeltl, just because he really played a lot of games. So for me, that's an additional point for you. And KPJ again, after the trade, that was his sweetest spot.
Yeah,
he was providing you triple double.
Yeah,
from back to back games.
From the
So
wire, bro.
I'm also really excited for Kevin Porter Jr. and probably that I would also add the likes of Moses Brown and Isaiah Stewart, who was really hot for like a couple of weeks as a waiver wire, and they've dominated several weeks. But then again, OKC sucks in terms of managing their players, and also Detroit as well. So
Yeah.
that's the reason why we didn't get some consistent performance from those two young bigs.
The one thing I can say, Detroit at least got with the program, and they're like, all right, if we're gonna tank, like let's just shut these guys down early and let them rock. Because I mean, I think everyone with the Isaiah Stewart pick, because Isaiah Stewart could have been in waiver pickup, he could have been in rookie of the thing. He was just right under beneath it. And one of the good things that he had is that Detroit made it clear they were tanking. They got rid of their guys. They started benching Plumlee, and they let him play. And at the end, he started going a little sour. His percentages started dipping. But overall, Isaiah Stewart was a real solid guy. He was putting up solid numbers for, a good, I want to say 6 weeks where he was really like, especially going into the playoffs though. And for the start of the playoffs, I would say towards the end, he kind of tailed off.
Agree. And also in his bad games, he's still providing like 2 to 3 blocks. So at least as a big man, you're still getting those stats. Our next award is, I mean, I'm just gonna give all the table to Mr. Taco here. For me, he is the lone breakout player. If there's another player that could go near him as a definition of the breakout player, maybe Jeremy Grant, just because he had a very strong first half of the season as well. But during those times, Julius Randle is already exploding, and then Julius Randle carried that over across all season. So that's what Jeremy lacked because Detroit tanked and he didn't play several weeks. But if just in case he played all season long, we could have like had an head-to-head matchup here between him and Julius Randle. But with that said, I mean, same as Jokic, I think I can't think of other players that could really knock off Julius Randle for this award.
And I'll be honest with you, Randall evolved right before our eyes, because if we watch what he did last year to what he did this year, you could see all the work that he put in. He studied his game. He saw where he was making his errors. Like last season, he would always spin himself into double teams and create turnovers. This season, while he still does that, he's a lot more cognizant of the other players on the floor and became a really dynamic playmaker that, while we did expect some of it, but not to this level that we actually end up getting. So I definitely agree with you that Julius Randle has to be there. But one other guy, before I go there, I think Grant, while he would have been competing with Julius Randle, I don't think he would have beat Randle because of the fact that Julius Randle was the main guy on a Knicks team that was expected to only get 22 wins, and he got us all the way up to 40. So it wasn't just the increase in the production that Randle had. His increase in production directly correlated to more wins for the team, which I don't think there's anything more than you could expect from or hope for a player. It's like, there's guys like, I want to say, Kevin Love in Minnesota. Kevin Love in Minnesota put up numbers, but they didn't contribute to winning. So like when they put him to a team like the Cavaliers, his production went down because guess what? You're a third player on this team. You're not what your numbers say you are. Your numbers are a byproduct of the opportunity that you're given. I think that's something, especially in fantasy, we have to realize, because sometimes you'll be like, this guy's amazing. And it's like, bro, he's good because he's playing and there's nobody else there. But the one player that I do want to say that I think was kind of slept on here, that I think really improved a lot, and that's Terry Rozier. Because in the start of the season, he was very down a lot of boards because he wasn't really an efficient scorer, and he really didn't do what people saw him do this year. This year, he hit over 200 threes. He hit 45% from the field, 81% from the free throw line. The guy got you over a steal per game. He almost had 300. He had 302 rebounds and 293 assists. So he was filling up the stat sheet. He scored a lot of points, and in 9 category head-to-head leagues, he ended up as being the number 15 player on the season with a overall preseason projection of 144. So he definitely, I feel like, showed up and showed out this year.
Exactly. I guess it's all about understanding the role in specific teams, because before he was like asked to be like a point guard, but during those times, him and Devontae Graham is still trying to understand the system, getting use of the main guy role in Charlotte. But once they got LaMelo, those two guys who are really scorers really find themselves in the role that they've wanted, and that suits them well. So I guess that's one of the key things here. That's the reason why Terry Rozier really is actually our awardee for our sleeper pick of the season. So yeah, go ahead, Mr. Taco.
What I was going to say is the other thing is the addition of Hayward was a really good player for that locker room, and I feel like for that team, because he's a very unselfish player. While Gordon Hayward could score, he does get his teammates involved. He does create those secondary passes, and he was a primary playmaker. So one, when he went out, it opened up a lot of time for Terry to get their stats. So that's one of the first things I said. But second, he was also someone that can create, and they would let Terry score and let Terry do his thing. So I definitely think that all around the way they built that team now, it's a lot better than it used to be. I think going forward, Charlotte's going to be an interesting and scary team because, like you said, they have some dynamic playmakers. They have some scorers now. You're looking at Miles Bridges, I think, at the end of the season with everyone going out, Miles Bridges, because let's face it, at most Miles Bridge owners, we came into this season expecting big things from him. And then as we watch the season progress, we watch his brother become everything that we thought Miles would do. and then as we got to the end of the season, when Charlotte started having everyone test positive for COVID and everyone went out, you went and picked him back up and he had the opportunity to play and he balled out. That final month of the season, he was really good. So I think that it's an interesting situation what they have going down there in Charlotte. And I really want to see what happens with Malik Monk and some of the other guys because I think he could possibly be on the move. And if he's on the move to the right situation, he's going to be one of those guys that we're talking about next year in this category.
Exactly. And also, as part of their core players, I'm also excited for PJ Washington. I just need to understand how will they eventually use PJ because as we've observed, whenever he plays as their starting center or most minutes in the center, he really provides you a lot of defensive stats, which is really hard to find because he shoots a lot of, I mean, he gives you points, he shoots snipes and gives you defensive stats. So that is going to be big in terms of fantasy value. So let's see if they will now move away from Cody Zeller or Bismack Biyombo, who's been with them for quite some time. I mean, the likes of Rashawn Holmes is available off season. I really would love like someone solid, some big solid young stud to be in the Charlotte Hornets uniform. So it's gonna be fun next season.
Do you see Rashawn Holmes as being like that next Christian Wood, the next guy, that next big man that now that he gets out of the situation, he's gonna be really good? Because think about it, like Detroit just let a great big man like that walk to Houston. And Holmes, I know for the Kings, has been really efficient and really solid. So for them to let him walk, it'll be crazy because he could walk into a situation where he becomes a star, where they actually will give him the role needed to actually perform. Because that's the thing about Wood. He was doing great for Detroit. And if Wood would have been healthy for this season, he'd be right up there as far as most improved. Because I don't even know if he's most improved. I want to say most underrated. Because Wood, when he's going right, is a monster.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to tag him as most improved because of the definition of improvement.
Right.
It's a matter of opportunities.
Right.
The skill was there before, but I don't know. I really don't know what Detroit was thinking when he was.
And they signed Mason Plumlee. It's like, what are you doing? Just give the money to Wood. Imagine you had Wood and Stewart over there, bro. And you had Killian Hayes as your point guard. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
I don't know, man. Maybe Mason is providing other thing that Christian Wood can't, which is a big mystery for everyone.
I mean, Mason Plumlee must have some relations going on with the GM's daughter or something, because the fact that they would and it's a team, there's no real person that they're spending money. They spent money on Grant. I would have spent money on Wood before I spent money on Grant, because Wood is perfect for that team. He's already there. He's efficient. I mean, Grant was good, but I don't know how much I trust him going into next season, especially if they get some more players there, because then he won't get the same points that he gets now, because it's not going to be the same. Hey, Grant, you have the ball. You're the man. Go make it happen. It could really be, especially depending on, imagine they get Cade Cunningham or something like that, where it's a guy that's going to directly come in and take away from his opportunities.
Exactly. It's really hard to talk about Detroit Pistons, to be honest, because you'll really get frustrated.
Yeah.
The fact that they drafted, I understand that Stewart is good, probably a decent ad, but they got him pretty early. There were a lot of options there, and they still would have gotten Stewart in the next round. But it was really a mystery for me for them to really get a lot of bigs in the initial part of the season. but going back to what you've mentioned earlier, I was gonna tag as well Terry Rozier as our sleeper pick of the season. I guess aside from him, I was also thinking about probably Darius Garland, who was picked, in the back door and provided a lot of solid value
Mhm.
for a lot of GMs. But I personally, I really appreciate what Rozier provided. When you have like someone like Rozier who could like explode and give you 40 points in a game, I mean that's a gift as a GM, because you have like a ticking time bomb in your
Mhm.
lineup. And if
Mhm.
you're playing head to head,
Mhm.
even in rot, it will really bump your stats. And
Mhm.
he actually also played a lot of games this season. I understand that he was out for a couple of games during the playoffs, but still,
Mhm.
he's like above 60 games. So
Mhm.
whoever drafted him really got the juice out of the lemonade, because Hayward was out for quite some time as well. So I really am happy to really give this award to Terry Rozier. So aside from him and maybe Darius Garland, do you think of other players that really slipped and provided value this season?
Um, I mean, maybe a guy like Jordan Clarkson or like Norman Powell. I know some people, for me in one league, I got Norman Powell off the waiver wire because someone had drafted him and dropped him, and like I immediately scooped him up. It was like in that in between period with Toronto. Before like because like what Toronto would happen is like I feel like everyone started going down a little bit, and then Norman just stormed in, and then he took over that starting role and never relinquished it. And he was really someone that was solid. And Jordan Clarkson, as we know, the dude hit 208 threes this year. He doesn't shoot the best in the field at 42%, but he's a scorer that can really knock down that three. And he was, again, you're looking at your preseason rank under Jordan Clarkson. He was like 186. Everyone looks at Donovan Mitchell. Everyone looks at Mike Conley. You look at Joe Ingles. You got Bogdan over there. It's like, where is Clarkson going to fit in? How is Clarkson going to get any of this shine? And he ended up being someone that really outperformed his value. And, you're looking at going into the season as really a great scorer or a really good scorer.
Yeah. Shout out to our Filipino representative, Jordan Clarkson. So we are really hoping, the whole nation is really hoping for him to win the sixth Man of the Year
I didn't
award.
even realize that he's part Filipino.
Yeah.
That's
And
lit.
he actually played for our team back in FIBA as well. So
Cool.
um, he was playing for the Lakers, I guess, or Cavs back
Yeah.
then. So
Yeah.
uh, it
That's
was
lit.
nice for someone from our country to to represent the whole nation.
I feel like then you guys are going to have a great playoff run because he could be a big part of the reason why they
Exactly.
make noise. I think he's going to be a really big player in real life for the Utah Jazz to make a run because coming off the bench and being that supplemental player behind Donovan Mitchell is going to be key because they're going to need scoring. And if Dylan Brooks is going to be locking up Mitchell, that's going to give Clarkson the opportunity to either go against Ja or whoever else. Maybe they'll probably put slow-mo on him and you're going to have to pick apart Ja. I feel like that's going to be the name of the game. Who can they match up that they can get onto Ja Morant? Because one team that we saw doing that last night was the New Jersey Nets. I mean, the New York Nets, Brooklyn Nets. They were playing against Boston. Boston was winning. At a certain point in time, they figured out we're going to switch until we get Kemba Walker on the matchup, whoever has the ball, and we're going to take advantage of Kemba Walker. I very much could see that, they could do something like that with Utah because Snyder's a great coach and he understands matchups. And the matchup that you're going to want to exploit is John Morant because let's face it, John Morant is a smaller guy. So if you're going to try to take advantage somewhere, that's going to be where you're going to go.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And to really back that up as an example, there's a lot of DFS teams that was killed by the Kemba Walker pick yesterday.
Oh man, I can't even imagine. Kemba,
Oh,
Kemba, Kemba.
yeah. And
So
speaking of
bad.
Utah, this I understand that this player didn't played a lot of games, but I really am I'll definitely give this award to him as a bounce back player of this season,
Mhm.
Mike Conley. And the runner up or the other player that I was thinking um, behind him was Derrick Rose. But
Mhm.
when I compared their performances last season,
Mhm.
in general, Mike Conley was was a little bit of shittier than Derrick Rose last season. Because, everyone was really hyped with Mike Conley. He was drafted what? Round 5, round 4 last season, but ended up in the free agent pool. So I guess the definition of bounce back, I have to give to it this to Mike Conley. He started the season super hot. Probably playing in the bubble in the playoffs really helped him, to get in the groove and play the system that Utah plays. Maybe it's also his injuries. I don't know, but thing is, at least for this season, it was really um, grooving for this Utah Jazz point guard. Utah really needed him, and when he really played this game, then we've seen how Utah destroyed several teams when they are all clicking. So I have to give this to Mike Conley. Do you have any other players in mind for the bounce back player of the season?
Yeah, I actually have one from my squad, and I don't know if we could really call it a bounce back, but I definitely think it's an improvement just because he did finish better than where he was and where it's expected. And that might be Nerns Noel. Because Noel, we know when he plays, he's a really like dynamic shot blocker. He's an efficient player. This season, he had 141 blocks. He played great for the Knicks. Last season, he finished like 71 in fantasy basketball, nine head-to-head category leagues. This year he finished 51. So I guess he finished higher. When he starts the season, Mitchell Robinson is there, and Mitchell Robinson is really blocking his path to minutes. And it started off where he wasn't that great, but as Mitchell got hurt and left for the season, it elevated Noel to a point where he was given the opportunity to really play, and he played top 50 ball. When you look at it, especially being someone that averages less than a turnover per game, but more than 2 blocks, almost 2 blocks per game, over a steal per game, doesn't kill you with free throw, is fantastic with field goal at 61%. Doesn't score the most, but to me, that's a guy where he was already, like, when you look at him, he was fading down at the start of the season, and he bounced right back up during the season and became a real player that helped win some people leagues. Like, you don't block 141 shots in a top 3, and you don't win some people some weeks in some leagues.
Agree. And to be honest, he is like, given that there's a lot of teams that drafted Nerlens, I can't put him in the part of the waiver
Mhm.
wire options, but he was there, especially when Mitch Robinson was injured. He was really playing well. He was giving you those steals and
Mhm.
blocks on a daily basis. But like what have you said, it's a matter of appreciating and embracing what does your player gives you, because a lot of GMs get frustrated
Mhm.
for some scenarios wherein such players that they've drafted or they've picked doesn't score much or doesn't rebound much, but it's something that if you want to really play better and learn more about fantasy basketball, you have to understand that players play roles, and
Mhm.
they have, gi- especially in head to head, there are designated players that give
Mhm.
you specific categories, and we
Mhm.
call them specialists. So
Mhm.
you have to really consider this in your analysis, in your
Mhm.
management if you're a GM. So yeah, that's my thoughts on
And
Nerlens Noel.
like I think like Noel, I don't think is what we call a sexy pick. But the sexy version of Noel is a Time Lord. Because let's face it, when people
Yeah.
hear Time Lord, it's like, hey, you might hit 6 blocks tonight. But it's the same thing with Noel. It's the same exact upside, same exact potential, same exact everything as Time Lord that you get in Noel, but he's just not as sexy, I feel like.
Agree. And speaking of Time Lord, I'm pretty sure next season will be the time that probably, hopefully,
Unleash
Time
that
Lord will
beast.
get unleashed, because
Yeah.
if Boston is really honest to all of the interviews that the reason why he was being held back was because of his injury, I really think that next season, without um uh who was there, I mean Daniel Tyus,
Yep.
without Tyus in the front court, he should be really be their main center, getting those minutes. Because yesterday, I mean earlier today, or probably yesterday in your
Yeah.
area, he got 9 blocks, bro. That's
And,
how good he is.
and the thing about him is like he is a great just defensive player. Like he doesn't necessarily have to block the shot to be a good defensive player, where some other players are just, will block shots, but he can actually move. He's flexible. He can guard guys in the perimeter. He reminds me a lot of a Mitchell Robinson, because Mitchell Robinson is a great defensive player. He's not just a shot blocker. Like if you watch him, he'll block threes with the offhand because he's able to get himself into that good defensive crouch and know what's going on. But I think that we could be looking at Time Lord as being the next Miles Turner, like next season's Miles Turner. Like I think that's the role that you'll see him. He'll be in the top like 25 or 50 when he's playing, because his blocks are going to be so insane. He could easily block 200 shots next year.
To be honest, bro, I'm much higher on him than Miles Turner. You know why? Because he's been playing with Al Horford for quite some time, and if you look at his dimes, aside
That's
from
true.
those defensive stats, he is giving you a lot of dimes, and it's
But he
gonna be big. So I'm seeing him that to be that a more defensive minded Bam Adebayo of the future. Maybe that's the upside that I see for Time Lord.
The only thing that scares me about him is offensively, his game seems a little bit under, because remember, Miles Turner gives you those threes that you don't normally get from a center. So I think that's why when you look at value comparatively, I do agree with you. Turner does not get assists. Meanwhile, Williams will get assists. Williams will get more rebounds than Turner, but he won't get those extra threes that Turner gets. That makes Turner just a little bit of like, damn, you're a center that's getting almost a 3 a game and you're getting like 2 blocks a game. Like, who does that? Like, so that's what I'm saying. Like, he could be like that Miles Turner of where they're in the top echelon of players that, you don't necessarily think of them being a top 15 or 20 player, but, between everything that he does, he's a stat stuff sheet monster, Williams. So he may not hit threes, he may not score the most points, but he could easily get you 6 rebounds, 7 assists, 5 blocks, 1 turnover, while shooting over 50 to 60% from the field and not killing you from the free throw line. So I mean, he's gonna be someone that you're gonna have to really watch out for next year.
Yeah, super juicy player. I think when Jonas Nader guests in this in our podcast, we'll definitely gonna talk about Robert Williams, because he really is in love with Robert Williams.
It's easy to see why. Like he's so studly.
Yeah, so we've been talking about a lot of positive impact players. So let's now talk about, you know, kind of like the bust draft pick of the season. There's a lot of players that was initially highlighted here. Back in when Josh Lloyd and I talked about this, when we were talking about Hassan Whiteside, because people are drafted him what, fifth round, sixth round, so it was really a bust. But
I
as
can't
I
believe they did
weigh
that.
in everything, when you got Whiteside in the first half of the season, you have the opportunity to move forward. You have the opportunity to drop him and then get some other players. So the player that I've nominated here didn't give you that opportunity. So I am really giving this award to Shea Gilgeous Alexander. Um, come on, dude. Shea SGA was one of the, or maybe the most hyped player last season. Everyone was really is really getting him even in the late first round. That's how high people is for SGA.
Mm-hmm.
And with what, he played less than 50 games this season. And the worst part here is he didn't play in the playoffs. So you're getting your second round pick or late first round pick on the shelf, fighting for your life for during the playoffs. I guess that's a real bummer. So I have to really give this award to Shea, especially that I have several Shays in my team, because he's lead in the third round, and I was thinking there's no way I'm not picking SGA within third round. So yeah, what's your thoughts, bro?
All right, so my bust draft pick of the year is not a pick, it's a team. And it's the same damn team, the Oklahoma City Thunder, because what the hell have you guys been doing all season? Oh my God, what trash. I've never seen someone try to tank so bad. And the NBA, we need to change the tanking rules because of this horrible franchise. Now, they're horrible from the perspective of us fans, but as a front office, we get what they're doing. They see this generational talent in this draft. They're trying to position themselves in order to get one of these good picks to go along with all the other picks that they have so they can maybe eventually build something. But what the fuck is going on with Al Horford? Excuse me for the cursing, but Al Horford to me is like one of those guys too, just like Shea, where it's like, for me, he fell towards the back half of the hundreds. You're looking at him in like almost like 90 something, and you're like, yo, Al Horford, when he plays, he gives you everything. And he's so good. And maybe they trade him at the deadline to a team that'll be a contender and he'll be able to really play good. No, what did they do? They said, you're not going to come back this season because we don't need you. And they just cut him. Like, do you understand what that felt like when you're looking at Al Horford and you're like, damn it, I thought it was a good value, but I can't drop him. And when he plays, he's good. Maybe they play him for a couple of weeks. No, you just got him. It's just So I hated everything. And then what they did with Dort, like God forbid Dort starts to do good. Oh no, let's take him out. Oh, you're out for 3 games. Let's come back. Oh, you're doing good again. Let me take you out. Oh, let me put you back in. Oh, you're doing bad. Guess what? You can stay there now. Now that you're doing bad, you can stay there. Like I hate what the Thunder did this season. They're the bust organization of the season. They're the bust pick of the season. You basically took anyone from that team, and I don't even think you can win because even with Brown, they were manipulating their center rotation where it's like Brown wasn't even getting the majority of the minutes until like the final 7-8 games of the season. As I'm looking at this stuff, I'm sitting there like, how is Brown not getting the minutes over? I forgot who the guy was. It
Tony Bradley?
Like, it was just weird what they were doing at center. And I'm just sitting there like, Brown is clearly the best rebounder. Yes, he may not be the best point guy, but God damn it, your team sucks at shooting. So just throw the rebounder out there, let him get his stats and keep it moving. But yeah, it's the Thunder. I hate them. I'm still aggravated with them, as you could tell. I had Shea. I had Al Horford in like 2-3 teams. Yeah, I hate them.
I couldn't agree more because like what I've said, I had a lot of Shea. I had to fight all majority of my playoffs without my top 3 picks, and it's super hard.
Yeah,
It's really super hard to really go there during the playoffs, go against top seeds without your top 3 players. I mean, how can you patch that up? There's no way you could pick someone that could um provide you those value unless this is a good transition to our next award. You've picked the likes of Kenyon Martin Jr. This dude, for me, I, I can't, here in the Philippines we call it the magic bunot. So bunot, in terms of translation in English, is like it's like you're trying to, as a magician, you're trying to get in your bag, and then you luckily found something. So we call it magic bunot, but I translated it to magic pick. There's a lot of players that you can add here. You have Tim Hardaway Jr. You can even add Isaiah Stewart, maybe Sadiq Bey. I mean, there's a lot of guys you can add here, but I have to give Kenyon Martin this award just because there would be instances wherein Tim Hardaway was drafted, or maybe Kela Olynyk was drafted, and they were just dropped because their owners needed more games, and it's a do or die. So I gave this to KJ Martin because he is someone that you not everybody knows. So it really defines how I define Magic Bunot, our Magic Big, just because who the hell is this guy killing me in the playoff matchup? So I have to give it to him. I was thinking O'Shea Brissett, but O'Shea Brissett was toned down when Demonta Sabonis was healthy in the playoffs. So for you, bro, do you have anyone else aside from KJ Martin?
You know me, I come with the gifts.
Yeah,
and I got one guy that helped me win a championship and helped me lose a championship because I faced him in the other league. This is a guy who, when we started the season, everyone liked him. He got traded, and then everyone didn't like him. He was sent to a bad situation. And then the rookie, or what would have been the rookie of the year, got hurt in Tyrus Halliburton, and that opened up the door for Dylan Wright to actually come back and be a monster. Because when you look at it, he was dropped by so many places when he got traded to Sacramento because he didn't have a role. He wasn't getting enough time, and he wasn't getting the ball enough for him to justify any kind of rosterage. But then when everyone went down because Fox got COVID, and then you had Halliburton injury. So now the whole backcourt just cleared out, and now he's gotten that opportunity. Over the last 2 weeks of the season, he was the 14th ranked player on average, right? He shot 48% from the field. He averaged 2 3-pointers per game, 12 points, 4.6 rebounds, 5.2 assists, 1.6 steals, 0.5 blocks, and only 2 turnovers. This dude was putting up some crazy numbers and stats in those last couple of games. His last 2 games, he really dipped off. But you're looking at games like May 11th versus Oklahoma City, 5 3-pointers, 21 points, 8 assists, 4 rebounds, 4 steals. The other game, he had 17 points, 7 rebounds, 9 assists. He had 23 points, 7 assists, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, 6 steals. Like, this dude was just going off. He had one game with 4 blocks, 4 steals. Like, he was just doing everything. And if you had him, like, to me, he helped me carry me in the playoffs in that one championship that I did win, because he was just stat stuffing. And in the league I was facing him, I couldn't catch up in steals because he added Dylan Wright, and Dylan Wright was getting so many steals. I'm sitting there like, oh my God. And I lost Brandon Ingram during the finals. I tried to add Dort because I thought Dort might have a shot with all the games they had. I had added Frank Jackson, who ended up getting hurt. I added Killian Hayes, who got the stomach, and I was on a limited moves. I only had 5 moves for the week. And I'm adding Killian Hayes. I'm like, he has 3 games left this week. I need assists. He might be able to do it. Stomach virus out. It's like it's comedy of injuries. It was Tatum's worst week, but Dylan Wright, like I said, he made me lose one matchup and he helped me win one matchup. And I know that he was owned on a rostered, I want to say under 50% of leagues. Going into that stretch, he was dropped so many places, and then we seen him shoot right back up during that run because he was just on fire.
Exactly. Like what you've said, his story this season was quite shocking because personally, I was expecting a lot from him for the Detroit Pistons. He was a really good player back in Toronto, but when he was traded to Dallas Mavericks, something didn't click well during his stint there. Probably because Luka is really getting a lot of touches, or the whole system was now defined to Luka. So Dillon's presence, wasn't meshing up, or probably it's just because of him, because his personality sometimes doesn't. He tend to not show up in several instances that whenever he an opportunity comes up. So thing is, he did came up back in Sacramento. So I really love your pick. Back in Detroit, he was also already showing glimpses of brilliance when everybody went down and Derrick Rose went to New York Knicks. So that was a really good pick there, Mr. Taco.
That trade baffled me so much when it happened, because I was like, why are you doing this to Detroit? First of all, I mean, I get you're tanking, but you're really getting rid of a guy who is on a cheap contract that is playing well for you, that could be a nice complimentary piece, and you just trade him off to Sacramento for what? What did you really even get for him? And in Sacramento, I'm looking at, I'm like, you have Halliburton, you have Fox, you have Buddy Hield. What the hell do you need this guy for? And when he came over, it was everything that I said. What the hell do you need this guy for? They weren't using him. They weren't playing him. He wasn't getting that time. And it took these injuries in order for him to get this opportunity. I think that they're going to use him hopefully better next season. But he's going to be one of those guys that as we put on our thinking caps and our evaluation glasses, it's going to be interesting to see where we end up having him going into next season, because he's shown glimpses of being top talent, but then we also seen him getting weird minutes in situations, and we just don't know what's going to play out, because let's face it, that's Fox's team. You don't draft Halliburton there, and you're not going to not give him the ball. So how much is this going to cut into his playmaking? Does that really end up cutting so much into his value now that he's not even worth it? So that's going to be the crazy thing, and that's why He's the magic donut because let's face it, he could have been nothing, and then all of a sudden he's like, "Up, I'm flowers," and then he's gonna turn back
Exactly.
into nothing in by next season.
Just a quick thought on that, bro. I think after quite some time, probably, just probably, maybe during the off season, maybe they would deal Buddy Hield and probably Bagley or Holmes because
Bagley has
as
to be
much as
traded.
I want to trust the Sacramento Kings, they haven't managed their team
No.
for the better. So
Mm.
maybe they will underrate Rashawn Holmes because
Mhm.
if you're not Sacramento Kings and if you check his contract is really juicy. His age is pretty solid. His performance is pretty solid. I mean, I would definitely get him over Bagley or over Hassan Whiteside if I needed a big. So there's a lot of pieces to deal with Sacramento because if they won't do anything big, they will stay mediocre. I don't think the Fox could really lead that team to at least be in the playoffs because I mean they really need something. Um, Harrison Barnes played well this season, but you know you can't trust Harrison Barnes to bring you to the glory land. So yeah, just me
I
quick
feel like
thought on that.
Bagley is one of the biggest disappointments because one, he got drafted over a guy like Luca. Like, first of all, Divac, that's why you don't have a job no more. Second of all, when you look at Bagley, he was good in college, but he has not been able to transition anything to the pros. And I already heard his family, his dad was talking about trying to get him out of there. So I honestly hope for that kid's career he gets out of Sacramento and he can go somewhere else where he gets an opportunity to really shine because he was a good player coming in, and I don't think they're using him right at all. I don't think it's a good situation. They're not a team that I trust. I don't think they do anything right. The only thing they did right was get lucky enough to get Halliburton. That's it. That's the only thing they do good. And I don't think they're going to be a team next year that's going to compete, even when they get a top pick. For all we know, they can end up getting another guard. Like their roster construction is horrible. I think that like you said, Holmes is the guy that you can't let go based on the way that room is set up for them. But it could happen. We just don't know. And I think the one guy that I'm interested to watching is Hassan Whiteside because to me it was a bad situation, and I don't know how people still drafted him in the 5th round, knowing that Rashawn Holmes was there, and knowing that you might have only seen a 24-24 split, or knowing how bad of a coach Bill Walton is, that he's all over the place. But I think that if he can get into a good situation next year, not Roy Hibbert, but Hassan Whiteside's going to be a comeback player because he's not a bad player. I don't understand how he's all of a sudden got this bad player moniker. When he played with the Heat, he was good. When he got traded to Portland, he wasn't the best, but when he played halfway decent. He's a good rim protector. He can score a little bit in the paint. So I really think that he's an interesting guy. And if the Knicks end up moving on from Mitchell Robinson in a package deal, which I think could happen, because I know the Knicks are going to be active looking for a superstar, he'd be someone that I'd love to see the Knicks sign to complement a Nerds Noel, have Whiteside, and then hopefully we try to get ourselves an elite playmaker to go with this team. And all of a sudden we're cooking with gas. I would love a guy like Karl Anthony Towns, but again, this is going to be a whole nother thing. But I do think that Mitchell Robinson might get traded from the Knicks this season.
Yeah, I really think this offseason will be pretty busy. We'll
Oh,
definitely have a lot of
oh,
episodes. I'm expecting a lot of movements this
oh
off
yeah.
season.
And we're definitely going to keep everyone involved, both the Filipinos and the Americans, because I know I'll be doing some content. I know you'll be on it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also gonna review um all of the division of the NBA in general. So I
Mhm.
probably would love you to be with me
Absolutely.
there because it's really it's fun to be with somebody when you're trying to review the
Yep.
performances of every team, right?
Agreed.
And now we'll be talking about the last and the most prestigious award for me for your fantasy team, just because after all of the weeks, all of the postponed games, the injuries and all, you have to value the most valuable player during the playoffs. Um, I have to give this to Russell Westbrook. I have to. He's been killing it since what? Since Bradley Beal got injured. He's putting a lot of stats, and fantasy basketball is all about stats. He, there was a week that I really thought that, come on, this could be the downfall of Russell Westbrook. I would admit that. I'll be honest with you guys. I thought of it in some weeks during the midseason, just because there was a lot of signs. He don't play back to backs. There was a lingering issue in his knees. Bradley Beal was thought of leaving the Wizards. So, all there's a lot of things happening, and I was preaching to our followers and our supporters that if you can trade Russell Westbrook with an enough value, I would do so, just because this is an opportunity for you guys to clear away the stress, because during those weeks Russell Westbrook isn't doing anything, and a lot of GMs has tendencies wherein if they're stressed enough handling their players, they're getting angry every time they're looking at the Yahoo app.
Mhm.
Then if you're that type of a GM, then the best thing for you to do is get some value out of that player that you've been pissed off.
Mhm.
But then again, Westbrook turned it around. He really ended the season super super strong. It's based on the season long fantasy performance, and also in DFS, because if you're playing DFS,
Mhm.
every time Westbrook is playing, you have to take him
Mhm. Mhm.
because he's definitely give you a lot of stats. So for me, bro, my playoffs MVP is Russell Westbrook. I would there in the previous episode, our guests there, the champions of our leagues that was created here in FBPH, told me that they still would pick Nikola Jokic as the MVP for the playoffs, and that's really arguable. I really also understand that, but I personally I would have to give Russell Westbrook. There was a game that he provided 18 assists. I mean, come on, you have to give some credit to this dude.
Mhm. No, I personally had been going into the season. I don't know if I had told you or someone else, but I had done a mock draft, and I was on our YouTube page where I'm breaking down strategy. My first pick was Jokic, and I think in like the third round or second round, I took Westbrook, and for the reason I took him is Westbrook wanted to be traded from Houston to a team like Washington so he can get the ball in his hands more and do stuff. And to me, when I look at a guy like Westbrook throughout his career, he wants to be a Hall of Famer. He wants to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He wants to go down as one of the best players ever. The fact that he wanted to trade to a place where he's going to get the volume meant to me he was just going to go off. The problem with Westbrook to me is always how many turnovers is he going to get, because he's a huge turnover guy, and what is his percentage is going to be, because he's not a good percentage guy. But he fills the bucket up so well. He gets you averaging a double-double for like what, his third season now. So that is rarefied air, especially if you do points leagues where you get bonuses for double doubles and triple doubles. He more than without a doubt is probably the MVP. But the one player that I have to put here, and I'm gonna put someone that no one knows so far you guys haven't mentioned, and I'm feeling good because I like to bring a little spicy spice to this, and I'm gonna bring up a guy that really shut things down for me, and that's gonna be Demonta Sabonis. He single-handedly lost me. Him and Wright, I think combined, just beat my whole team in the finals. And I had been the number one seed. I had lost only 1 week for the whole season. I mean, I had Kawhi go horrible in that last stretch. Tatum could be down for least valuable player during the playoffs because he's a guy that you drafted with one of your top picks and he did nothing. Ingram was out. But Demonta Sabonis over the last 30 days averaged 62% from the field, 74% from the free throw, 1.1 threes, 23 points, 14 rebounds, 10.7 assists, 1.8 steals, zero point 0.4 blocks, 3.9 turnovers, and guess what? He plays center. He freaking plays center. You're telling me your center is not only giving you 14 rebounds but 10 assists, and he's shooting 62% from the field? Oh my God. Are you kidding me? From a center? Like, that's just absolutely insane. He put up numbers even better than Jokic on that final 30-day stretch on average, just because like the Pacers were hell bent on trying to make the playoffs, and he was doing some crazy things. The game versus Philadelphia where they won 16, 13, 15. Game versus Washington where they lost by 1 point, 30, 13, 13. The game versus OKC where they dominated. They had one like almost like a 60-point win, 26, 19, 14. The game versus Washington where they lost 32, 19, 9. Like the guy was just insane. Final game of the season versus Toronto, 25, 16, 5, 3 steals. Like, dude is just a monster. I think Demonta Sabonis, like you said, I think that, you know what? He reminds me more of like a Julius Randle. Like he's playing like the way they're using him now is they're using him like Julius Randle and like Jokic. It's like they have become the focal point of the offense. They're gonna run it. They'll score when they need to score, but they're gonna look for their teammates. They're gonna get them involved. And I think it's more like Jokic than Randle because Randle towards the end of the season he wasn't playmaking as much as like a guy like Jokic or like Sabonis was. And I think that going into next season, it'll be hard to not put him at least in the top 12 of players that you're looking at, and that you might have to go after because Demonta Sabonis is elevating himself not to a star, but into a budding superstar.
Yeah, and I mean, first off, part of my top 10 all-time favorite players is his dad, Arvidas Sabonis. So
yes,
I'm really,
Portland
I'm
all
really
day.
yeah, I'm really rooting for him as well. And if you check how Indiana plays,
Mhm.
they really value how Sabonis, manages the whole system, and it's very evident because the likes of Miles Turner isn't getting a lot of touches, isn't getting a lot of rebounds. So it just shows what role does Domantas Sabonis plays for the Indiana Pacers. And in fantasy, if you really want to, get some stats, this observation is very crucial because, like Russell Westbrook, if a certain player is the center of their system, you have to have him in one of your top picks. So I would agree with you with that. But in the past seasons, the reason why Domantas Sabonis isn't been that top caliber or top touted center or player for fantasy is because number one, his health. We all know how GMs usually scares away out of this so-called injury-prone players, and number two, his defense. So usually, if you definitely have a list of bigs, rebounds wise, sure, out of position assist definitely there. But when you put him beside Gobert in terms of defensive end, that's the main difference for those type of centers. So like what you've said, it's about your identity. It doesn't necessarily mean that hey, this dude doesn't block. So I can do is I just draft him in my second round and probably get some blockers in the succeeding round. So you can do that approach.
Or imagine this. Imagine you get and you could have had it last year, but a stack of a Jokic and a Sabonis. You're talking
Yeah.
about big men that could play make that they don't get the most blocks, but their assists are better than point guards, most point guards. Because let's face it, the point guards these days, like John Morant is not an assist guy. You would think I'm getting John Morant, I'm getting one of the best point guards in the game, I'm gonna get all these assists. His assists really aren't there like that. Like guys like Sabonis, guys like Jokic get more assists than a guy like John Morant. And hate it or love it, that's just the way the game it is, and that's just the way they play that offense. They run it through him. They give him the opportunities to play make. Or he's the kind of big where he'll get the rebound, and instead of waiting for the point guard to come around and get the ball up court, he's immediately taking that ball and he's pushing it down court, trying to take advantage of the mismatches in transition and get easy baskets. So all around, I definitely agree with you, and I think roster construction is big because think about it. If you get a guy like that, but then you snag a Nerns Noel who had 141 blocks, who a lot of people forget about and kind of sleeps down. All of a sudden now you're looking at least between the two of them, you're getting 70 blocks per person, which is not that bad. I mean, you're thinking about it. Noel was a top 3 shot blocker. There isn't that many shot blockers like that. That's what makes Miles Turner and Gobert so, I don't want to say valuable, but so rare because they are the centers that are hitting you with 190, 140 shot blocks, and they can really almost to themselves win a category or dominate a category. Like Miles Turner and one other shot blocker, you win every week.
Exactly, exactly. I would agree with that. Probably you can get some Chris Boucher down the line.
Imagine you get Time Lord. You're looking at
Yeah,
Time Lord and him, and all of a sudden you're just like, yeah, I'm done. Black's in mine.
exactly. And before we end this episode,
Mhm.
I would just want to share my runner-up for another runner-up for the MVP playoffs. I think this dude, this has some emotional roller coaster happened to him in this COVID season. I would like to dedicate this episode to him because I really hear what he experienced during the whole season, especially starting of last season. So I have to give a big shout out to Carl Anthony Towns. I mean, this dude played his heart out. He's been uh, dealing with a lot of things, but as you can see, since he got healthy, he was playing better. Probably not the first rounder that you wanted, but I mean, out of other centers, he can bring you a lot of things efficiently. And one thing that I love with Carl Anthony Towns' game is he can influence your free throw percentage, which is something that rarely comes in from a big. So I have to give a really shout out to this dude because a lot of GMs really hated him, really wanted him gone in their player in their team. So it's gonna be interesting next season because I think I'm pretty sure of it. He is gonna be one of the value picks for next season because people will really remember that he didn't play the whole season. He will tag him as the injury prone player, and they will think that Minnesota sucks. So I think he's definitely a value pick for next season.
I agree with you on that. And I'll be honest with you, Carl Anthony Towns is one of those guys that if the Knicks are gonna make a move, oh my god. I mean, I know Thibodeau has history with him, so it really depends if Tibbs thinks he can work hard enough to play in the system. But oh my god, Carl Anthony Towns is an absolute stud. Like, what center averages 2.4 threes, 48% from the field, 85 from the line, while still getting you blocks and rebounds? Like, he is a special talent, and I do agree people are going to make him slide. And because of his 3-point prowess from a center who still gets you good percentages, no, this guy is going to be definitely a stud. He's a top 6 pick, and if he slips out of that, you're getting value. But one last thing that I will touch on, just to bring back up, because we had mentioned busts, and I think the number one bust for me that I didn't bring up, James Harden, because James Harden was a guy that everyone drafted number one overall. He was the 101. He was the guy that you had to take. But coming into the situation, I did a whole video on this. James Harden this season was in a very scary position. The reason why he's a bust is not because of his talent, just because of he didn't really play. And it was a weird situation for him coming into this offseason because we knew he had the issues with the Rockets. So it wasn't a situation where it's like, well, yeah, he just got hurt during the season and didn't live up to expectations. It was a situation where coming into the season, there was a ton of question marks that left it very ambiguous. And one of the things I had said is he was out of shape. And with him being out of shape and potentially going to a traded team, it could hurt you because he could get hurt. And that's ended up what happening. Now you can't predict injuries. You can't, when Harden plays, he's an absolute monster, and he would have justified that positioning. But I gotta take my victory lap on that because I did call that James Harden wouldn't be the top up there, and I was pumping up a Jokic. I was pumping up a Curry. I did pump up Steph Curry a little bit. Those are some of the guys, and Towns. So Towns burned me, but the other guys held me down.
Yeah. To be honest, I was on reverse on James Harden just because he was really an you know probably a unicorn for the past year.
Oh yeah,
He that he's up there, and if
all
even
time
if he
fantasy great.
plays in Brooklyn, personally, I think he can still provide
Oh
the
yeah,
number one value, right?
I agree.
And the reason for me, because I have a lot of Harden as well, because there
Mhm,
are instances when I got him like third pick or fourth pick. I have to pick him, right? So,
mhm, mhm.
but unfortunately, the reason why I would also somehow agree with the Bass thing is he was never injured. Imagine this: when he was lone I mean, alone and
Mhm.
just pushing by himself when he
Everything.
was in Houston.
Mhm.
He was healthy, but
Mhm.
the moment he got some
Mhm.
friends,
Mhm.
that's the,
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
the only season that
Mhm.
he
Mhm.
did play in the playoffs of the
Yep.
fantasy basketball. So I don't know if it's just like a jinx or I don't know
I
what
think, you
I
know
could
what I really
say,
think it
but
was? I think it was his conditioning. Because let's put it like this. Normally, James Harden he may not be the most athletic player, but he's usually in good shape and he plays a lot of minutes throughout his career. He is a minute player. So it's not like the thing about James Harden is not only does he not miss games, he doesn't miss plays, he doesn't miss minutes. The guy is in there for every possession, every play, trying to do his absolute best. And I think that's the one thing where when you look at James Harden going into next season, he's easily a top 5, top 3 pick because yes, he is not going to score the 30, 35 points that he would have scored in Houston. But what he is going to do is he's going to get at least 12 to 15 assists per game because they run him as the point guard. They have Kyrie really running off ball, and they have Kevin Durant just being Kevin Durant. It's like whenever you need the ball, bro, just take it and do what you got to do. Like, you know what I mean? And the thing about Kevin Durant, which makes it work so well, is that Kevin Durant is not caught up with trying to score the most or trying to have the most assists or trying to be the face of the team. Kevin Durant just wants to win. And I think that was the biggest reason why when he left Westbrook and went to the Golden State Warriors, that he fits so well is that was his attitude. He's like, I don't need to be MVP Kevin Durant. You know who I am. I'm gonna do what I do, and that's what he did. And I think that's what makes the net so scary is that all the stars have decided, hey, I don't need to be the man. I just want to win. And that's going to be really scary in this playoffs. And I need to really see how the playoffs shake out before I can, stamp him as being that number one pick again. But he's definitely top 5 again. And definitely I don't expect him to really get hurt again next season. And he is going to be next year's comeback player of the year because let's face it, he's not that great of a year this year. And next year, I think he's going to finish in the top 5. And this year, he finished like what 40, 50. So that's my early pick on bounce back player of the year. And that's what I
nice.
said.
And to be honest, understanding how GMs usually work, they usually remember those negative stuff
Mm-hmm.
compared to the positive stuff. So I'm
Yep.
pretty sure this will really pan out as a value pick again for us next season
Yep.
because the likes of Anthony Davis,
Yep.
who else? The likes of Kristaps Porzingis,
Yep.
Triple J,
Yep.
um, DeAndre Hunter, and anyone who hurted some GM, they will definitely remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And come by next season, those would be value picks. Those players from
Mm-hmm.
Toronto, I'm pretty sure they will definitely slide. The Aaron Fox, he will slide.
OG
Um,
Anunoby.
yeah, OG Anunoby,
He
Pascal
was
Siakam,
he
yeah.
OG Anunoby was like going like this, going like this. He was ready to start. Like instead of going like this with his open plane, he was about to be like this. And then Toronto said, No, 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 no. Please sit. You're hurt now. And it's like, this is the finals. It's the semifinals. He's breaking out, and you're taking him out. So I think that's something that we're gonna have to keep in mind. And I do think that OG Anunoby is gonna be one of those super sleepers because OG Anunoby, man, he can stat stuff and he can score. And I'm really hoping that next season, they'll have more consistency. Because the one thing about Toronto this year is they played all their games in Tampa. They didn't have a home court at all this season because of the quarantine and because of everything that's going on with COVID. So not only next year we're gonna get a full season, but they'll be playing at home and hopefully they'll be competing for the playoffs. So they don't have to do this nastiness that they did all year. Because I'll say this: the Masai Ujiri is a mastermind because he knew how good this draft was. He said, "My team, we can maybe make some noise in the playoffs, but no, 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 no. We want that 11 seed. We want a possible shot at some good picks." And I think Toronto is going to be a very interesting team next year, especially depending on what they do in the offseason.
Yeah, and to be honest, in terms of OG's potential, there's a lot of international analysts who was burned by him this season because
Yeah, me too.
they thought that this was the season. And
Yeah.
and to be honest, I would agree with them because I mean if you'll check the lineup of Toronto, I mean
Mm-hmm.
there's no one from their lineup that could really block the opportunity that OG has. But
Mm-hmm.
well, this was a different season, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and
Especially
his
now that
health was really a problem.
Yeah, especially now that Norman Powell was traded, I felt like that even opened up more shots for him because now you don't have Powell taking all those extra threes. And while I still think that Gary Trent Jr. is a nice player, I don't think that he gets the same kind of minutes that Powell does, and I think that opens up that floor spot for Pascal Siakam to easily. I think he's a top 50 player with upside.
Yeah, I think that's we can have like a separate episode about it because
Yeah.
I would love to talk about aside from the undervalued or value picks, we have to talk about as well the overvalued picks, and
Yeah.
I also think that Gary Trent Jr. will be one of those overvalued players
Mhm.
for next season. People don't realize that there's a very fine line difference between how Norman Powell plays and how Gary Trent plays.
Mhm.
They thought they were interchangeable. I
Mhm.
think, I mean, Norman Powell, I call him Norm the Storm
Mhm.
because whenever any prime players from the Toronto sits, he can turn it up. And
Mhm.
I don't think Gary Trent can do that.
Mhm.
He's just like, some sort of like a potential 3 and D guy that is still young, that has
He's a
potential.
great role player off the bench. He's
Yeah.
a guy that, when Powell goes down, you need someone to fill some minutes, boom. Or well, not Powell's down, but you know what I mean? Like when you have that
Laurie
player
or
that's in that
FBB.
position, down, boom. He's a great backup. And we gotta remember, Toronto's gonna be in this draft lottery. So they're gonna come out with another good pick, and we don't know what's gonna happen with Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry could be gone next season. And that's going to be a lot more shots that are going to be available, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. So I think Toronto is going to be a huge question mark going into this offseason, and they're going to be one of those fun teams to watch because fantasy-wise, I feel like they have a lot of players who could be impactful because, let's face it, Pascal Siakam, like you said, he started off the season not that great, and then he missed towards the end of the season. So it's kind of like a lot of managers and owners are just like, what do I do with him? But then you see, like the game versus Washington, 60% from the field, 2 3-pointers, 44 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists, 1 steal. The guy can do everything. So he's another one of those guys where it'll be interesting to see how far he falls because of his bad season and what Toronto did.
Exactly. And before we end this episode, just want to slip it here that there was a time, well, maybe this is part of Masai's board game or chess game, that he actually offered Pascal Siakam for James Harden. So I was thinking that Masai really has a plan on the back of his pocket, and probably no one else would be safe in the Toronto Raptors lineup because I'm pretty sure they would really want to invest for the future. I don't think if they stick together, they can be that, that the Kawhi team that can be on the
Mhm.
top of the
Mhm.
Eastern Conference.
Mhm.
Brooklyn Nets improved. Um, Somehow Indiana Pacers improved.
Mhm.
Philly improved. I
Mhm.
mean, Toronto needs to improve if they want to contend. So
And
again,
Charlotte's gonna, because remember Lamelo was out for a good portion of the season. If Lamelo comes back, that Charlotte Hornets team becomes very interesting as well.
Atlanta too.
Yeah.
Atlanta actually uh, did an all-in move, and they would also probably do some more moves come this offseason. It's gonna be interesting, super interesting on what would they do for John Collins and
Mhm.
DeAndre Hunter. Yeah, there you go.
I think
That's some.
I think my Knicks are going to be an interesting team because we have cap space, we have picks. We may not have top picks, but we have extra draft capital. I think if we make a move and we get another star, all of a sudden you have to look at us as being top flight. Maybe top 5 Eastern Conference teams, and Miami I think can only get better because there's rumors that they may get Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, your New York Knicks will definitely be a threat moving forward. They've
Mhm.
proven themselves,
Mhm. And
and
they're
for
young.
the yeah,
RJ's
exactly.
20 and Randall's like 26.
And RJ Barrett didn't have. I mean, he improved, but he really didn't break out like 100%. So there's still some window for progress and for upside there. And then for the Miami Heat, I it's kind of like I'm torn for the Miami Heat because I don't think they have a chance to be a champ with their current roster. They really need to improve something. They really need to go all in, and I do believe that Pat Riley knows this. That's the reason why he
But
was
that's why they were
courting.
going. That's why they were going after Kyle Lowry, and I think
Yeah,
Kyle Lowry
exactly.
is such a good fit there because it allows Jimmy Butler to play more off ball and let him do his other things. And then even if you switch it and you roll reverse it, and then you put Jimmy Butler as the creator, you can then have Lowry coming off and scoring. And then it all sets up with Bam Adebayo, who I feel like had a huge down season. And if we look at what's going on, like just in real life playoffs, that game versus Milwaukee Bucks that they just played, it was a great game. Great game. Like that series is a great series. But if you watched, they were fading back on Bam, and they were like giving him that 17-foot jumper from the elbow, and he did not take it ever. He would not even look at that shot. He would look to pass or he'd look to bring it in. We have to figure out what's wrong with Bam Adebayo because he needs to be hitting that shot in order for him to justify that contract and justify the moniker that people put on him, because he cannot be only operating from the paint in. He needs to be able to knock down some of these jumpers. At least free throw line extended. You got to be able to do that, at least if you want to be a competitive big man in this league.
Agree. And for those people that is watching and will be watching this episode and plays DFS, here's a pick for you for the upcoming games for Miami Heat. You have to always play Goran Dragic because he is a big time playoff player. That's his home. That's where he blossoms. So he've proven it to me in last game. I've already picked him in my DFS picks and won me some prizes. So you have to always put the dragon there because usually he's undervalued in terms of DFS money wise value. So that's my pick to you. So bro, it was a very very solid episode again as usual. Thank you so much for dropping by. We've
Anytime.
tackled a lot. I mean, it's not only awards, but we've almost talked about what would happen next season. We've almost talked about some playoff matches. So this was a really fruitful episode, bro.
I'm glad. I love to be on. I love to talk basketball with you, Pop, because you understand the game and you understand, especially from a fantasy player's perspective, and the real life aspects of the game and how minutes and positions are played and what to look for. So I love these conversations that we have, and I definitely look forward to continuing in the off season so that we can make sure everyone's ready for the start of the new season.
Exactly. So before we wrap this up, I'm just gonna shout out some possible special guests in the upcoming days. So for our supporters and our fantasy basketball family, this is my gift to you. I tried to contact some of the well-known sports analysts aside from Mr. Taco here. So there's a possibility that someone from the NBC Edge named Jonas Nader, wink wink, and from Hoopball, Dan Bestbris, wink wink, could drop by here in our podcast. So I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty hyped up. We're just polishing some schedule. So I'll definitely drop some information about it. But similar to what we've had here with Mr. Taco and back then with Josh, we'll definitely gain a lot of information, a lot of tips, a lot of pro moves, and several solid perspectives that we have probably we haven't thought about in our leagues here in the Philippines. So it's gonna be a super lit episode. And now I'm gonna bring the table to Mr. Taco here to promote his show.
So yeah, guys. First and foremost, again, I have to thank you, Poppy. I'm looking forward to these episodes as well because I like to see the perspectives from other people, especially within the industry, and to hear you speaking with them, I think is great because you have interesting perspectives that add to the knowledge base. And for us out here in America, I'm glad that we can get you on some of these English things because normally we won't be able to understand the Filipino podcast, but you have tons of great info. And like I said, your group has a ton of great information for the fantasy players. Personally, what I do here at the Daily Sporting is I'm like the head guy here doing content. We're focusing mainly on the fantasy sports aspect. We do fantasy basketball. We're in fantasy baseball, but we're really gearing up for fantasy football. In America, that is our bread and butter sport. The most people play fantasy football out of any fantasy sport in America. So for us, that's huge. I'm going to be coming out with a lot of content, breaking down players, breaking down picks, giving you draft strategies, and giving you mock drafts. So there's going to be a lot of content coming that way. But for you basketball fans, what we're actually going to be doing tonight, I'm having a panel where we're going to talk about the playoffs, like just actual basketball on what's going on. Poppy, I'm definitely going to want to have you on one of these nights for the playoffs, because I'm going to be keeping this going through the whole season, whole playoff season. I'm going to be really breaking it down and getting some basketball minds on there for you people that enjoy the game, because I think this is going to be a great playoffs. I think there's about 8 teams, maybe 5 to 8 teams that can win it. We all think the Nets probably are number one if they keep everything going, but you can't count out the Lakers, can't count out the Suns. I think the Bucks and the Heat are all interesting. So there's a lot to talk about, and I love to talk it.
Yeah, and before we end this show, who is your dark horse of this solid playoff lineup?
So,
Personally, my dark horse is going to be the Portland Blazers. How about you?
see, like I feel like Portland is super scary. Like if you watched them last night, you can easily see them getting their way to the Western Conference Finals. I would want to say the Knicks, because I think that they can maybe win the first round and maybe win the second round, but I don't want to go too homer with it. So I'm actually going to go with the team that's the number 2 seed, but is getting no love, and that's the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns, everyone is acting like the Lakers are just going to come out here and dominate them. And it is possible, because LeBron James is LeBron James and Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis. These are 2 of the top 5 best players in the game. But when you look at what the Phoenix Suns do well, they're efficient. They're damn near solid offensively, where you really can't see many weaknesses on that squad other than maybe an Ayton, and then you could always make the pieces work where you can make these subs out. But Booker and Paul are dynamic in the backcourt. You have Bridges, who's a great scorer. You still got Cam Johnson up front. They're going to have to do a lot to hold down Anthony Davis, and I think that's where the Lakers, if they win this series, that's going to be the reason, is because Anthony Davis really goes off. But I think Phoenix, because if they win that, there's a good chance they can win this title, and I would love to see Phoenix versus the Nets. I do think the Nets are a better team, but Chris Paul deserves a championship. He's point guard.
Yeah, I agree. And this is one of those seasons that no one stands out as, like how GSW played back in their days, how Miami was a king of the East at almost all of NBA, how the Spurs and the Lakers also dominated their
Well,
several seasons.
even last year with the Lakers, I feel like the Lakers were the clear-cut people last year, because you finally had that pairing. And then once they started rolling, they beat everyone systematically. So, this year, I feel like this is the year that the Lakers don't have that air of invincibility. And that's just because we've seen LeBron James get hurt.
Yeah, and we've also saw LeBron James got away with a COVID suspension, but that's another topic to talk about. Anyway, thank you so much, Mr. Taco. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, and it's too less of a time for us to discuss, and we
Absolutely.
really love to talk about it. Like we can do it like all day long. So
Absolutely. And first and foremost, I do want to thank you again for coming on to our podcast a couple of times. I know during the fantasy playoffs, I loved having you on so we could talk players and bring up some of the guys. We both came out with that Kevin Porter Jr. the second everybody went out. We both were like, get him now. Do it. I even added him during the stream. So it's definitely great content. And bro, keep up the hard work, man. I love seeing what you're doing.
thanks, bro. And for our supporters and our fans, kindly support Mr. Taco. As you can see, how passionate he is. You can't find this passion to all of our well-known sports analysts, because maybe because we're just still young in our career, but this is what it's all about. It's about heart. It's about love. You always want to hear and talk with those people who shares the same passion as you. So I really really love having Mr. Taco and also guesting to his show as well. So again, to our supporters, support Mr. Taco and the daily sporting, and also if you haven't liked or subscribed or followed our page as well, Fantasy Basketball PH Podcast. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. That goes as well with the daily sporting. So actually, Mr. Taco is more active in Twitter than me because I'm a Twitter bum.
Yeah, Twitter's my jam right now.
So also follow Mr. Taco there. So we had one of our longest episode, but for me, this deserves a long discussion. I mean, we've waited for a long time to give this recognition to such players, and we really
Mhm.
need to have this, somehow in depth discussion about what happened the whole season and why
Mhm.
such players deserve this recognition. So again, thank you so much, Mr. Taco, and thank you to everyone. Happy weekend, guys. Have a good sleep. Let's get ready for the solid playoff matchups upcoming in the upcoming days. This is probably one of the most exciting matchup, to be honest, just because no one's dominating the league. So yeah, supporters of the New York, I don't have anyone to support because my Spurs fell down. So
Hey, you're gonna get a great pick.
yeah, finally, and I hope Derek White will be much healthier next season. To be honest, it was very evident he is one of the key players
Yeah.
of our San Antonio Spurs. But yeah, we're gonna talk about it in future episodes. We're gonna review season performances from several teams. I won't do it per team, similar to how Josh Lloyd does it. I'm gonna do it per division probably. Just to give it like a big drop of information. And I might do it with Mr. Taco here because
Okay.
we love to be with each other and talk
Mhm.
basketball.
All day
So
long.
yeah, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much, Mr. Taco. Thank you everyone, and have a nice day. Happy weekend, guys.
Peace.